Most people pray desperately, begging an external God for help, never realizing they're actually pushing away the very thing they seek. Joel Goldsmith discovered a revolutionary truth that changed everything. God isn't separate from you, waiting to be convinced. The divine presence is your own consciousness when freed from human beliefs. Traditional prayer keeps you in victim consciousness, believing you lack something that must be granted from outside. But Goldsmith learned that authentic prayer isn't asking for anything. It's the recognition of what already is. When you stop begging and start recognizing, miracles become natural expressions of your true nature. This isn't positive thinking or wishful hoping. This is the mystical secret that dissolves the illusion of separation between you and infinite supply, health, and harmony. Every problem exists only in the realm of human belief, not in spiritual reality. Your consciousness, aligned with truth, is the healing presence itself. Goldsmith spent years praying the traditional way, asking God to heal his clients, to provide solutions, to change circumstances. Results were inconsistent and temporary. Then came the breakthrough that revolutionized spiritual healing. He stopped asking God to do something and started recognizing what God already is. In that moment of recognition, healings became instantaneous and permanent. Not because God finally decided to act, but because Goldsmith stopped interfering with divine action through his human concepts of lack, limitation, and separation. The healing presence was always there, waiting for recognition, not supplication. This recognition prayer isn't a technique you learn. It's a consciousness you become. When you embody this understanding, your very presence becomes a healing atmosphere. People around you experience spontaneous improvements because you're no longer projecting the belief in problems that need fixing. Here's what changes everything. God never hears your words. God responds to your consciousness. When your consciousness is filled with fear, lack, and limitation, that's what manifests regardless of how beautifully you pray. But when consciousness recognizes its own divine nature, prayer becomes unnecessary because you are the answer. Goldsmith discovered that every genuine healing happened not when he prayed harder, but when he stopped praying altogether and simply rested in the recognition of spiritual perfection. In that silence, the human sense of problems dissolved, revealing the harmony that was always present beneath the illusion. This isn't about believing in God. It's about recognizing that the I that is conscious right now is God expressing as individual being. You don't have to become spiritual. You are spiritual. You simply need to stop believing in the illusion of separation that makes prayer seem necessary in the first place. The most profound prayer Goldsmith ever prayed contained no words, made no requests, sought nothing. It was pure recognition. I and the Father are one. Not as future possibility, but as present reality. In that recognition, everything that seemed to need healing or changing simply wasn't there anymore. This recognition doesn't require faith, hope, or belief. It requires only the willingness to see through the illusion of separation that makes you think you're a human being who needs divine help. You are divine help, appearing as human experience. Problems exist only when you forget this truth. When you truly understand this, traditional prayer becomes impossible. How can you ask yourself for what you already are? Instead, you rest in being, and from that rest, perfect action emerges naturally. This is the secret that transforms every aspect of your experience from limitation to limitless expression. Sarah had prayed for her son's healing for 3 years. Traditional prayers, desperate pleading, bargaining with God. Nothing changed. Then she learned Goldsmith's approach. Instead of asking God to heal her son, she recognized that in spiritual reality, her son was already perfect, whole, and complete. Within 2 weeks of this shift in consciousness, her son's condition began improving dramatically. The doctors called it spontaneous remission, but Sarah understood the truth. She had stopped projecting the belief in disease and started recognizing the spiritual perfection that was always there. This wasn't positive thinking or denial. Sarah still took her son to medical appointments and followed treatments, but her consciousness no longer held the belief that healing needed to happen. She recognized that healing was the natural state, and illness was only a temporary appearance in human experience. Marcus lost his job and spent months praying for employment, growing more desperate with each rejection. His prayers were filled with fear, lack, and limitation. Then he discovered Goldsmith's principle. Consciousness is the substance of all form. His fearful consciousness was actually creating more experiences of lack. He stopped praying for a job and began recognizing himself as the source of infinite supply. Not through affirmations or visualizations, but through the deep understanding that consciousness, being infinite, can never actually lack anything. Lack is only a belief, not a spiritual reality. Within days, opportunities began appearing from unexpected sources, not because God finally answered his prayers, but because his consciousness was no longer broadcasting the belief in limitation. He had become receptive to the abundance that was always trying to express through him. Linda's marriage was failing. She prayed constantly for God to change her husband, to make him more loving, more understanding. The more she prayed, the worse their relationship became. Then she learned Goldsmith's revolutionary approach. You can never change another person through prayer because there is no other person. There is only one consciousness expressing as infinite individual beings. When she stopped trying to change her husband and began recognizing the divine nature expressing as both of them, their relationship transformed naturally, not through external change, but through the recognition of their spiritual unity. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting abuse. It means recognizing that harmony is the natural state of being when consciousness is aligned with truth. From this recognition, right action emerges naturally, whether that's deeper intimacy or clear boundaries. David faced bankruptcy. Traditional prayers for money had failed completely. When he learned to recognize consciousness as the source of all supply, something remarkable happened. Instead of money appearing, better opportunities emerged. His business transformed, debts restructured themselves, and abundance flowed through channels he never imagined. The key wasn't asking for money, it was recognizing that consciousness, being infinite, can never actually be bankrupt. Financial problems exist only in human belief, not in spiritual reality. When consciousness aligns with this truth, material supply follows naturally as the outer expression of inner abundance. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond recognition prayer, Goldsmith discovered the power of treatment through consciousness. This isn't visualization or mental manipulation. It's the practice of knowing the truth about any situation until that truth becomes your lived experience. When consciousness holds only spiritual reality, human appearances must conform. For physical healing, instead of fighting disease, you recognize that in spiritual reality, there is no disease. There is only perfect, harmonious being expressing as individual existence. You don't try to heal anything. You recognize that healing is unnecessary because perfection is the only reality. This recognition isn't a mental exercise. It's a shift in the very foundation of your being. When consciousness truly recognizes spiritual perfection, the body naturally expresses that perfection because consciousness is the substance from which all form emerges. The practice of spiritual discernment transforms every challenge into an opportunity for deeper recognition. When problems appear, instead of seeing them as real conditions requiring solutions, you discern between appearance and reality. The appearance may seem real, but reality is always spiritual perfection. This discernment isn't denial of human experience. You still take practical action when necessary, but your consciousness isn't fooled by appearances. You see through the illusion to the spiritual reality underneath, and from that recognition, right action emerges naturally. Every person, situation, and condition is an opportunity to practice this discernment. Each time you choose to see spiritual reality instead of human appearance, your consciousness becomes clearer, and your experience becomes more harmonious. Goldsmith taught the profound practice of meditation without desire. Most meditation seeks something: peace, healing, enlightenment. But true meditation is the complete absence of seeking. It's resting in being without wanting anything to be different than it is right now. In this meditation, you don't try to contact God or achieve any particular state. You simply rest in the recognition that what you are seeking, you already are. The peace you want is your nature. The healing you need is your reality. The enlightenment you desire is your true identity. From this rest in being, all necessary action arises naturally. You don't make decisions from human reasoning. You allow divine intelligence to express as right action through your individual experience. This is living from consciousness instead of trying to improve consciousness. The practice of invisible supply reveals how abundance operates in spiritual reality. Instead of looking to external sources for what you need, you recognize consciousness as the source of all supply. Every form of abundance is simply consciousness appearing as whatever is needed in the moment. This isn't about attracting money or material things. It's about recognizing that consciousness, being infinite, contains within itself everything necessary for harmonious expression. When you need something, instead of looking for it externally, you recognize it as already present in consciousness. This recognition often brings supply through unexpected channels. Not because you attracted it, but because consciousness naturally expresses as whatever form is needed. Supply follows recognition, not human effort or manipulation. This is how miracles become natural occurrences. Many people struggle with this approach because their human mind keeps interfering. Thoughts arise saying, "This isn't working," or "I need to do something." Goldsmith taught that these thoughts are not yours. They're the voice of human belief trying to maintain its illusion of separation and limitation. The practice is to neither fight these thoughts nor believe them. Simply recognize them as appearances in consciousness, no more real than clouds passing through the sky. Your true identity remains untouched by these temporary mental formations. When doubt arises, don't try to overcome it with positive thinking. Simply return to the recognition of what you are, consciousness itself, appearing as individual being. From this recognition, doubt naturally dissolves because it has no foundation in reality. Physical symptoms often intensify when you begin this practice, not because it's not working, but because consciousness is bringing hidden beliefs to the surface for recognition and release. This is actually a sign of deep healing, though it may not feel comfortable initially. Instead of being discouraged by temporary increases in symptoms, recognize them as beliefs leaving consciousness. Each symptom is an opportunity to practice deeper recognition of spiritual perfection. Don't fight the symptoms. Recognize through them to the reality of perfect being. This process requires patience and persistence. Years of human belief don't dissolve overnight. But each moment of recognition, regardless of how brief, establishes your consciousness more firmly in spiritual reality. Healing is happening even when appearances suggest otherwise. Relationships often become challenging when one person begins practicing recognition consciousness, while others remain in traditional human thinking. Family members may resist or misunderstand your new approach to life's challenges. The practice here is to recognize the divine nature of others, even when they're expressing human limitation. You don't try to convince them of spiritual truth. You simply hold them in consciousness as perfect spiritual beings, regardless of their current expression. This often leads to natural harmony without any external discussion or conflict. When your consciousness recognizes only spiritual perfection in others, they tend to express more of their divine nature in your presence. Change happens through consciousness, not through human persuasion. Financial challenges persist for some because they're trying to use spiritual principles to get material results, which keeps them trapped in human consciousness. True spiritual supply isn't about getting money. It's about recognizing consciousness as the source of all form, including material abundance. When you need something, instead of worrying about where it will come from or how you'll afford it, rest in the recognition that consciousness already contains everything necessary for harmonious expression. Supply appears through whatever channel is most natural and beneficial. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to live from recognition consciousness throughout daily activities. Instead of moving through your day as a human being trying to be spiritual, you recognize yourself as spiritual being appearing as human experience. Every activity becomes an expression of divine consciousness. This transforms work from mere employment into divine service. Relationships become opportunities for consciousness to recognize itself. Even mundane tasks become expressions of infinite intelligence appearing as individual action. Nothing is separate from the divine expression of being. This isn't about thinking spiritual thoughts while doing human activities. It's about recognizing that what you call you is actually consciousness itself, appearing as individual expression. From this recognition, all activity becomes harmonious because it's sourced in divine intelligence. Healing others becomes effortless when you understand that there is no other to heal. There is only one consciousness expressing as infinite individual beings. When someone appears to need healing, you recognize the spiritual perfection of your shared being, and that recognition is the healing. You don't send healing energy or pray for their improvement. You simply rest in the recognition that in spiritual reality, they are already perfect, whole, and complete. This recognition in your consciousness appears as healing in their experience because consciousness is indivisible. This approach works regardless of physical proximity. Distance is only a concept in human belief, not a reality in consciousness. When consciousness recognizes spiritual perfection, that recognition expresses as healing wherever it's needed, because consciousness is everywhere present. Business and career transform when conducted from recognition consciousness instead of human ambition. Instead of trying to succeed or avoid failure, you recognize consciousness as the intelligence expressing through all genuine activity. Success becomes the natural expression of divine intelligence. This doesn't mean becoming passive or avoiding practical action. It means taking action from recognition rather than from fear or desire. When consciousness recognizes its own infinite intelligence, right action emerges naturally, leading to harmonious results. Competition disappears because you recognize consciousness as the source of all genuine activity. What benefits one expression of consciousness benefits all. Cooperation becomes natural because you recognize your essential unity with everyone and everything in your business environment. Parenting from recognition consciousness transforms both you and your children. Instead of trying to control or improve their behavior, you recognize their spiritual perfection. This recognition creates an atmosphere where their divine nature naturally expresses more consistently. You still provide guidance and maintain appropriate boundaries, but from recognition rather than fear. Your consciousness, resting in spiritual truth about your children, becomes the healing influence that supports their natural development and expression of divine qualities. This approach often produces remarkable changes in children's behavior and development, not through external manipulation, but through the recognition of their true nature. Children are naturally responsive to consciousness that recognizes their divine identity. Complete transformation occurs when recognition becomes your natural state, rather than a practice you do. You no longer shift from human consciousness to spiritual consciousness. You simply rest in the recognition of what you've always been, consciousness itself. From this recognition, life becomes effortless. Not because challenges disappear, but because consciousness meets every appearance with appropriate action sourced in divine intelligence. You don't overcome problems. You recognize through them to the spiritual reality that dissolves them. This is not a perfect human life. It's the recognition that perfect spiritual being is expressing as human experience. Every moment becomes an opportunity for deeper recognition and more harmonious expression of divine consciousness. The ultimate realization is that there was never anything wrong that needed fixing, no one separate who needed healing, nothing missing that required supply. These were all appearances in consciousness, like dreams that seem real until awakening reveals their illusory nature. You don't become spiritual through this practice. You recognize the spiritual nature that you've always been. Problems don't get solved. They're revealed as having no foundation in reality. Healing doesn't happen. The illusion of disease is seen through to the spiritual perfection that was never actually disturbed. This recognition doesn't make you indifferent to human experience. Instead, it makes you infinitely compassionate because you see through all appearances of limitation to the divine nature that is everyone's true identity. Living this understanding daily requires no effort because it's not something you do. It's the recognition of what is. Every person you meet is consciousness recognizing itself. Every situation is consciousness expressing as experience. Every challenge is an invitation to deeper recognition. Prayer becomes unnecessary because you are the answer to every prayer. Seeking ends because what you sought, you are. Healing is recognized as the natural state, and disease as temporary appearance. Supply is recognized as consciousness itself, and lack as impossible illusion. This doesn't make you superhuman. It reveals your true nature as spiritual being expressing in human form. From this recognition, miraculous becomes natural, and natural becomes expression of infinite divine intelligence appearing as your individual experience. Joel Goldsmith's ultimate teaching is beautifully simple. You are not a human being having spiritual experiences. You are a spiritual being having human experiences. This recognition transforms everything while changing nothing, because what you are seeking, you already are. Stop praying to God and recognize yourself as the divine presence you were seeking. Stop asking for healing and recognize yourself as wholeness itself. Stop looking for supply and recognize consciousness as infinite abundance expressing as your experience. This is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of living from your true identity. Every moment offers the opportunity to recognize more deeply what you are and to express more fully the divine consciousness that is your real nature. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.